Welcome, and let your mind drift gently through the corridors of time itself. Tonight, we embark on a peaceful journey through humanity's eternal quest to measure the unmeasurable, to capture the flowing river of time in the vessels of our invention. From the first shadows cast by ancient sundials to the incomprehensible precision of atomic clocks, we shall explore together how our ancestors and contemporaries alike have sought to understand and quantify this most mysterious dimension of our existence. Let us begin by imagining ourselves in a time before time was measured, when our earliest ancestors lived by rhythms far different from the precise seconds and minutes that govern our modern lives. Picture, if you will, a world where the passage of time was felt rather than counted, where the sun's journey across the sky and the phases of the moon were the only calendars needed. In these ancient days, time was not a resource to be managed or saved, but rather a natural flow to be experienced, as inevitable and unremarkable as breathing. The story of timekeeping is, in many ways, the story of human civilization itself. As we settled into agricultural communities, as we began to coordinate our activities with others, as we developed trade and governance and ritual, we found ourselves needing to agree upon when things would happen. The simple question of when shall we meet required an answer more precise than when the sun is high or after the harvest moon. Consider the profound shift in human consciousness that must have occurred when we first began to divide the day into segments, to name the hours, to create appointments and schedules. This was nothing less than a revolution in how we understood our place in the cosmos. We were no longer merely subject to time's passage. We were beginning to master it, or at least to create the illusion of mastery. The earliest attempts at timekeeping were beautifully simple, relying on the most fundamental relationship in our earthly experience, the interaction between the sun and the shadows it creates. Long before the first sundial was deliberately constructed, our ancestors surely noticed how shadows moved throughout the day, how they shortened as the sun climbed toward its zenith and lengthened again as evening approached. Perhaps a tall tree in a village clearing served as the first unofficial timekeeper, its shadow sweeping across the ground like the hand of a great clock. Let us travel now to ancient Egypt, where some of the earliest known sundials were created around 3,500 years ago. These were not the ornate garden decorations we might imagine today, but practical instruments of surprising sophistication. The Egyptians divided their day into 12 hours of daylight and 12 hours of darkness, a system that seems natural to us now but was revolutionary in its time. Imagine the priest or scribe consulting the sundial to determine the proper time for prayers or offerings, watching as the shadow crept across the marked surface with infinite patience. The Egyptian sundials were often portable, small enough to be carried by travelers and merchants. One particularly fascinating example from around 1500 BCE consists of a horizontal bar with a vertical shadow-casting element at one end. The bar would be oriented east-west, and as the sun moved across the sky, the shadow would fall on different hour marks carved into the bar. In the morning, the device would face east. At noon, it would be turned to face west. This simple rotation allowed the sundial to track the sun's movement throughout the entire day. But sundials, for all their elegance, had obvious limitations. They were useless on cloudy days and completely ineffective at night. As human activities became more complex, as trade routes extended across vast distances, as religious and civic ceremonies required precise timing, the need for alternative methods of time-keeping became apparent. This need gave birth to one of humanity's most ingenious early inventions, the water clock. Water clocks, or clepsydry as the Greeks called them, represent a profound leap in human ingenuity. Here was a method of measuring time that didn't depend on the sun, that could function day and night, in any weather. The basic principle was beautifully simple. Water flows from one container to another at a relatively constant rate, and by measuring the amount of water that has flowed, one can measure the amount of time that has passed. Let us imagine ourselves in ancient Athens, in the law courts where some of the earliest water clocks were used to limit the length of speeches. Picture the scene. An orator stands before the assembly, making his case with passion and eloquence, while behind him, water drips steadily from a bronze vessel. When the vessel empties, his time is up, regardless of whether he has finished his argument. Democracy itself was being regulated by the steady drip of water. The Greeks and Romans refined water clock technology to remarkable levels of sophistication. Some water clocks didn't merely measure time, they announced it. Elaborate mechanisms were devised where the rising water level would trigger bells, open doors, or cause figurines to move. In the Tower of the Winds in Athens, built around 50 BCE, a sophisticated water clock not only kept time, but also displayed the seasons and astrological information. Water, that most fluid and changeable of substances, had been harnessed to create mechanical precision. As we move gently forward through history, we find ourselves in medieval China, where water clock technology reached heights of complexity that wouldn't be matched in Europe for centuries. The Chinese polymath Su Song, working in the 11th century, created a water-powered astronomical clock tower that stood 40 feet tall. This remarkable device didn't just tell time. It was a mechanical model of the heavens, showing the positions of the sun, moon, and stars. The clock tower featured an armillary sphere and a celestial globe, all driven by a water wheel that advanced in precise increments. Picture this tower in your mind, a structure as tall as a 4-story building. Its mechanisms powered by flowing water, its various levels displaying different aspects of astronomical time. On one level, mannequins would appear at doors to announce the hours with drums and bells. On another, the celestial sphere would rotate to show the current configuration of the night sky. This was not merely a timepiece. It was an attempt to capture the entire cosmic order in mechanical form. The story of how mechanical clocks emerged in medieval Europe is shrouded in some mystery, like a tale half remembered from a dream. Somewhere in the late 13th or early 14th century, possibly in the monasteries of England or the workshops of northern Italy, someone created the first true mechanical clock driven by weights and regulated by an escapement mechanism. This innovation would change the world in ways its inventor could never have imagined. The escapement is perhaps one of the most elegant mechanical innovations in human history. Its purpose is to release the energy stored in a wound spring or raised weight in controlled, regular increments. Picture a gear tooth being caught and released in an endless dance of precision. This tick-tock rhythm, so familiar to us from centuries of mechanical clocks, is the sound of time being divided into equal portions, the continuous flow of time being transformed into discrete, countable units. The first mechanical clocks were enormous affairs, installed in church towers and public buildings. They had no faces, no hands to show the hours. Instead, they announced the time by striking bells, calling the faithful to prayer, marking the beginning and end of the working day, creating a shared temporal framework for entire communities. The word clock itself comes from the Latin clocca, meaning bell, reminding us that these devices were heard long before they were seen. Let us pause for a moment in a medieval town square, perhaps in Strasbourg or Prague, as the great clock in the cathedral tower strikes the hour. The sound rolls across the rooftops, penetrating workshops and homes, reaching the farmers in distant fields. Everyone hears the same sound at the same moment. Everyone knows it is now the 9th hour or the 12th hour. Time has become public, shared, a common resource that binds the community together. As we drift forward into the 14th and 15th centuries, we see clock faces beginning to appear, first with just an hour hand, sweeping slowly around a dial marked with Roman numerals. The minute hand wouldn't become common until the 17th century, when mechanical precision had improved sufficiently to make the tracking of minutes meaningful. Consider how this visual representation of time must have changed people's perception of their daily lives. Time was no longer just announced at intervals. It could be consulted at any moment. One could watch time passing, see it as a physical movement across a dial. The development of spring-driven clocks in the 15th century made portable timepieces possible. No longer were clocks confined to towers and public buildings. They could be carried in the home, eventually in the pocket. The first spring-driven clocks were still quite large, ornate table clocks owned by the wealthy, but they represented the beginning of the democratization of time. Time was becoming personal, private, something an individual could own and consult without reference to public bells or sundials. Picture a wealthy merchant in 16th century Augsburg or Nuremberg, one of the great clockmaking centers of the era, commissioning a table clock for his study. This is not merely a utilitarian device, but a work of art. Its case decorated with gilt bronze, its dial adorned with astrological symbols, its mechanism visible through crystal panels. Every hour, perhaps, small figures emerge to enact a scene from mythology or scripture. This clock is a status symbol, yes, but also a philosophical statement. Its owner has mastered time, brought it into his private domain. Now let us turn our attention to one of the most crucial developments in the history of timekeeping, one driven not by philosophy or convenience, but by urgent practical necessity, the quest for accurate timekeeping at sea. To understand why this was so important, we must first understand the problem of longitude. Imagine yourself on a ship in the middle of the ocean in the 17th century. You can determine your latitude relatively easily by measuring the height of the sun at noon or the position of certain stars. But longitude, your position east or west, is far more difficult to determine. The Earth rotates, carrying you with it, and there are no fixed landmarks at sea to tell you how far you've traveled in an east-west direction. The consequences of not knowing your longitude could be catastrophic. Ships would miss their intended landfalls, crash into unexpected shores, or become hopelessly lost at sea. The solution, in principle, was simple. The Earth rotates 360 degrees in 24 hours, or 15 degrees per hour. If you knew what time it was at a reference point, say Greenwich, England, and you knew what time it was where you were, based on the position of the sun, you could calculate your longitude. The problem was that no clock of the era could keep accurate time on a rolling, pitching ship, through variations in temperature and humidity, over voyages that might last months. Enter John Harrison, a self-taught English clockmaker whose name deserves to be spoken with the same reverence we reserve for the great scientists and inventors of history. Harrison spent most of his adult life, from the 1730s to the 1770s, developing marine chronometers that could keep accurate time at sea. His journey was one of obsession, frustration, and ultimately, triumph. Harrison's first sea clock, now known as H1, was completed in 1735. It weighed 75 pounds and stood 4 feet high, a magnificent piece of engineering with counterbalanced components designed to remain stable despite the ship's motion. But Harrison was not satisfied. He continued to refine his designs, creating H2 and H3, each more sophisticated than the last, but still not achieving the accuracy he sought. Then, in a remarkable shift of approach, Harrison created H4, completed in 1759. Instead of a large clock, H4 was what we would call a watch, only 5 inches in diameter. It was a marvel of miniaturization and precision, incorporating innovations like a bimetallic strip to compensate for temperature changes and a special escapement that required no lubrication. On its trial voyage to Jamaica in 1761, H4 lost only 5 seconds over the 81-day journey, a level of accuracy that seemed almost miraculous. Let us take a moment to appreciate what Harrison achieved. He had created a mechanical device that could maintain accuracy to within a few seconds per day, despite constant motion, changing temperatures, and salt air. This wasn't just superior engineering. It was a triumph of human persistence and ingenuity. Harrison's chronometers would save countless lives and make possible the great age of navigation and exploration that followed. As we move into the industrial age of the 18th and 19th centuries, we see time taking on new meanings and new urgencies. The factory whistle replaced the church bell as the marker of daily time for millions of workers. Punctuality became not just a virtue, but an economic necessity. The coordination of complex industrial processes required precise timing. The railway networks that began spreading across continents in the 1830s and 1840s demanded standardized time across vast distances. Consider the situation before railway time was standardized. Each town and city kept its own local time, based on when the sun reached its highest point in that particular location. Noon in London was several minutes different from noon in Bristol, which was different again from noon in Plymouth. For most of history, this hadn't mattered much. Travel was slow, and the few minutes difference between one town and another was insignificant. But when trains began racing between cities, when timetables needed to be coordinated, when connections needed to be made, these small differences became problematic. In Britain, the Great Western Railway began using London time, or Greenwich Mean Time. along its entire route in 1840. Other railways followed suit, and by 1847, most British railways were using what they called railway time. There was resistance, of course. Some towns proudly maintained their local time, seeing the imposition of London time as a form of metropolitan tyranny. Some church clocks showed both local time and railway time on different faces. But efficiency won out, and by 1880, Greenwich Mean Time was legally adopted throughout Britain. The United States faced an even greater challenge. The vast continent spanned multiple time zones, and before 1883, there were over 300 local times in use across the country. Railroad companies struggled to create coherent timetables, and passengers were often confused about arrival and departure times. Then, on November 18, 1883, a day that became known as the Day of Two Noons, the major railroad companies implemented a system of 4 standard time zones across the continental United States. Picture the scene in cities across America on that day. At precisely noon, local time, telegraph signals from the Naval Observatory in Washington would instruct railroad stations to reset their clocks to the new standard time. In the eastern parts of each time zone, clocks would be set back. In the western parts, they would be set forward. Some people experienced 2 noons that day, hence the name. It was a moment of profound psychological adjustment, a recognition that time was not a local, natural phenomenon, but something that could be standardized, regulated, and controlled by human decision. Let us now drift forward into the late 19th and early 20th centuries, where we encounter new innovations in mechanical timekeeping that brought unprecedented accuracy to everyday life. The pendulum clock, refined over centuries since its invention by Christian Huygens in 1656, reached levels of precision that seemed to represent the ultimate achievement in mechanical timekeeping. The finest pendulum clocks of this era, installed in astronomical observatories, could keep time to within a few thousandths of a second per day. Consider the short synchrotome clock, developed in the 1920s by William Hamilton Short and the Synchrotome Company. This remarkable device actually consisted of 2 pendulum clocks, a master clock kept in a vacuum chamber to eliminate air resistance, and a slave clock that displayed the time and performed the work of impulsing the master. The master pendulum swung freely, almost without mechanical interference, achieving an accuracy of about 1 second per year. These clocks were so precise that they could detect the slight changes in gravitational pull caused by the moon's orbit, a phenomenon that had to be compensated for in the most demanding applications. Meanwhile, personal timekeeping was being revolutionized by the mass production of watches. The American Watch Company, founded in Waltham, Massachusetts, in 1850, pioneered the use of interchangeable parts and assembly line production methods for watches. What had once been a luxury item, handcrafted by skilled artisans over many months, could now be produced efficiently and affordably. By the early 20th century, a reliable pocket watch was within reach of the average working person. The wristwatch, initially considered effeminate and worn primarily by women, gained acceptance among men during World War I, when soldiers found them more practical than pocket watches in combat conditions. Picture a soldier in the trenches of France, timing an artillery barrage or coordinating an advance. The ability to check the time without reaching into a pocket, without taking one's hands off a weapon or equipment, could be a matter of life and death. After the war, returning soldiers continued to wear wristwatches, and they quickly became the dominant form of personal timepiece. As we enter the electronic age, we witness a transformation in timekeeping as profound as the shift from sundials to mechanical clocks. The story begins with a discovery about the behavior of crystals under electrical stimulation. In 1880, Jacques and Pierre Curie discovered that certain crystals, including quartz, exhibit what they called piezoelectricity. They generate an electrical charge when subjected to mechanical pressure, and conversely, they vibrate when subjected to an electrical charge. This discovery would lie dormant for several decades before its timekeeping potential was recognized. In the 1920s, Warren Marrison, working at Bell Telephone Laboratories, created the first quartz clock. He discovered that a quartz crystal, cut to a specific shape and size, would vibrate at an extremely stable frequency when subjected to an electrical current. These vibrations, typically 32,768 times per second in modern quartz watches, could be counted electronically to keep highly accurate time. Let us pause to appreciate the elegance of this number. 32,768. It is precisely 2 to the 15th power, which means that a simple binary counter can divide these vibrations down to exactly 1 pulse per second. In your quartz watch, a tiny crystal, no bigger than a grain of rice, vibrates faster than the human ear can hear, its oscillations counted by microscopic electronic circuits to mark the passage of seconds with remarkable precision. The first quartz clocks were large, expensive laboratory instruments, but the development of integrated circuits in the 1960s made possible the creation of quartz watches small enough to wear on the wrist. The Seiko Astron, released on Christmas Day 1969, was the world's first production quartz wristwatch. It was more accurate than any mechanical watch, yet it would run for a year on a tiny battery. The quartz revolution had begun. Within a decade, quartz watches had devastated the traditional mechanical watch industry. Swiss watchmakers, who had dominated the global market for centuries with their superior craftsmanship, found their products suddenly obsolete in terms of pure timekeeping accuracy. Many historic watch companies went out of business or were absorbed by larger corporations. The number of watchmakers employed in Switzerland fell from about 90,000 in 1970 to 30,000 by 1983, a period the Swiss refer to as the quartz crisis. Yet mechanical watches did not disappear entirely. They found new life as luxury items, valued not for their accuracy, but for their craftsmanship, their history, their emotional appeal. A fine mechanical watch became a statement about values, a rejection of disposable technology in favor of lasting artisanship. The gentle tick of a mechanical movement, the sweep of a second hand around a dial, the weight of a finely crafted case. These tactile, aesthetic pleasures could not be replicated by quartz technology. Now let us turn our attention to the most precise timekeeping devices ever created by human hands: atomic clocks. To understand atomic clocks, we must first understand that atoms themselves are natural timekeepers of extraordinary reliability. Every atom of a particular element, when excited to a specific energy state, emits radiation at exactly the same frequency. This frequency is determined by the fundamental laws of physics and is more constant than any mechanical or electronic oscillator we could build. The principle of the atomic clock was first proposed by Isidore Rabi in 1945, but it was Louis Essen and Jack Perry at the National Physical Laboratory in England who built the first accurate cesium atomic clock in 1955. Their device, nicknamed Cesium I, was accurate to 1 second in 300 years, far surpassing any previous timekeeper. The cesium atom was chosen because it has only one stable isotope, cesium-133, and its resonant frequency is relatively easy to measure. In an atomic clock, cesium atoms are excited by microwave radiation. When the frequency of this radiation exactly matches the natural resonance frequency of the cesium atoms, precisely 9,192,631,770 cycles per second, the atoms absorb the maximum amount of energy. This frequency is so reliable that in 1967, the international definition of the second was changed to be based on it. 1 second is now defined as the duration of 9,192,631,770 periods of the radiation corresponding to the transition between two hyperfine levels of the ground state of the cesium-133 atom. Think about what this means. We no longer define time by the rotation of the Earth or the swing of a pendulum. We define it by the behavior of atoms, by quantum mechanical processes that occur at scales far too small for us to see or directly experience. The most fundamental unit of time in our daily lives is determined by events happening billions of times per second in the quantum realm. Modern atomic clocks have achieved levels of precision that challenge our ability to comprehend them. The most accurate atomic clocks currently in operation, optical lattice clocks using strontium or ytterbium atoms, are accurate to about 1 second in 15 billion years, longer than the age of the universe. These clocks are so sensitive that they can detect the effects of general relativity at scales of just a few centimeters. If you raise one of these clocks by the height of a single step on a staircase, it will run detectably faster due to the slightly weaker gravitational field. This extreme precision isn't just a scientific curiosity. It has practical applications that touch our daily lives in ways we might not realize. The Global Positioning System, or GPS, relies on atomic clocks and satellites orbiting the Earth. These satellites broadcast timing signals, and GPS receivers calculate their position by measuring the tiny differences in arrival times of signals from multiple satellites. Without the precision of atomic clocks, and without corrections for the relativistic effects of the satellite's speed and altitude, GPS would accumulate errors of several kilometers per day. Let us take a moment to marvel at this. When you use your smartphone to navigate to an unfamiliar address, you're relying on a system that depends on atomic clocks, special and general relativity, and the ability to measure time differences of mere nanoseconds. The profound theories of Einstein, the quantum mechanical behavior of atoms, the engineering prowess to place atomic clocks in orbit, all of this comes together in a device you carry in your pocket. As we contemplate the current state of timekeeping technology, we might wonder if we've reached the ultimate limits of precision. But scientists continue to push boundaries. Research is underway on nuclear clocks, which would use transitions in atomic nuclei rather than electron shells, potentially achieving even greater accuracy. These clocks might be sensitive enough to detect dark matter, to test whether fundamental constants of physics change over time, or to probe the quantum nature of gravity itself. The story of timekeeping is also a story of synchronization, of creating shared time across vast distances. In our modern interconnected world, this synchronization has become critical for everything from financial transactions to internet communications. Computer networks use protocols like Network Time Protocol to synchronize clocks across the globe to within milliseconds. High-frequency trading systems in financial markets require synchronization to microseconds or even nanoseconds. Consider the complexity of maintaining synchronized time across our planet. The International Bureau of Weights and Measures in Paris combines the readings of over 400 atomic clocks in more than 70 laboratories worldwide to create International Atomic Time, or TAI. But the Earth's rotation is gradually slowing down due to tidal friction, so atomic time gradually diverges from astronomical time. To keep our clocks aligned with the Earth's rotation, leap seconds are occasionally added to create Coordinated Universal Time, or UTC, the basis for civil time worldwide. This creates interesting challenges and debates. Some argue that leap seconds should be abolished, that we should let atomic time run free from its astronomical roots. Others maintain that keeping our clocks tied to the Earth's rotation is important for cultural and practical reasons. It's a debate that touches on fundamental questions about what time means to us as humans. Is time a purely abstract mathematical concept, or is it intrinsically tied to our experience as beings on a rotating planet orbiting a star? Let us now reflect on how our relationship with time has been transformed by the technologies we've explored. In the pre-industrial world, most people's experience of time was cyclical, tied to natural rhythms of days and seasons. Time was something that passed, not something that was spent or saved or wasted. The development of accurate clocks and the standardization of time created what we might call industrial time. Linear, uniform, measurable, a resource to be optimized. In our current digital age, we live in what some scholars call network time, a constant present of instant communication, where events happening on the other side of the planet feel immediate and local. We carry devices that not only tell us the precise time, but also fill every moment with potential connections, entertainments, and obligations. The anxiety many people feel about time, the sense that it's constantly slipping away, that there's never enough of it, is partly a product of our ability to measure it so precisely and fill it so completely. Yet even as our technological relationship with time becomes more complex, we remain biological beings with internal rhythms evolved over millions of years. Our circadian clocks, regulated by light and darkness, by temperature and activity, often conflict with the demands of mechanical and digital time. The phenomenon of jet lag is a visceral reminder that our bodies keep their own time, independent of what our watches and phones might say. As we near the end of our journey through the history of timekeeping, let us consider what the future might hold. Some futurists envision a world where time becomes even more personalized, where our devices don't just tell us the time, but optimize our schedules based on our biological rhythms, our energy levels, our cognitive performance. Others worry about the tyranny of hyper-precise time, where every second of our lives is tracked, measured, and monetized. There are also profound questions about time at the extremes of physics. As we probe the quantum realm and the cosmic scale, our everyday notions of time break down. At the quantum level, particles seem to exist in superpositions of states until observed, calling into question the very notion of when something happens. At the cosmic scale, the expansion of the universe and the effects of gravity on time create a complex tapestry where simultaneous events in one reference frame are sequential in another. Some physicists even question whether time is fundamental or emergent, whether it's a basic feature of reality or something that arises from more fundamental processes. These are not just abstract philosophical questions. As we develop quantum computers and probe the early moments of the universe's existence, our understanding of time itself may need to be radically revised. Yet for all these profound questions and technological marvels, time remains, at its core, a deeply human concern. We mark time not just with clocks and calendars, but with memories and anticipations, with the rhythm of our heartbeats and the cycle of our breaths. We experience time not as a uniform flow, but as something that speeds up and slows down, that can drag in moments of boredom or fly in moments of joy. Think of how differently we experience time at different stages of our lives. To a child, a year seems an eternity. To an older person, years can seem to flash by in quick succession. This isn't just perception. It's related to how our brains process and store memories. Novel experiences create more detailed memories, making time seem to slow down in retrospect, while routine experiences create fewer memorable moments, making time seem to accelerate. The development of timekeeping technology has given us unprecedented control over our schedules, our coordination with others, our ability to plan and predict. But it has also created new anxieties, new pressures, new ways of feeling out of sync with the world around us. The same devices that connect us to global time networks can also make us feel constantly behind, always trying to catch up with an impossible standard of productivity and engagement. As we reflect on the long history we've traced, from shadows on sundials to vibrations of atoms, we might ask ourselves, has all this precision made our lives better? There's no simple answer. The ability to coordinate complex activities, to navigate accurately, to schedule our lives with precision, these are undeniable benefits. But the loss of temporal flexibility, the constant pressure of deadlines, the anxiety of always knowing exactly how much time has passed and how little remains, these are real costs. Perhaps the wisdom lies not in rejecting precise timekeeping, but in maintaining a balanced relationship with it. We can marvel at the atomic clock's precision while also taking time to watch a sunset without checking how many minutes it lasts. We can appreciate the convenience of synchronized global time while also honoring our body's natural rhythms. We can use our sophisticated timepieces while remembering that the most important moments in our lives, falling in love, watching a child take first steps, saying goodbye to someone we cherish, exist outside the framework of hours and minutes. In the end, the story of timekeeping is a story of human ingenuity and human needs, of our desire to understand our place in the cosmos and to coordinate our lives with others. From the first person who noticed the shadow of a tree moving across the ground to the scientists probing the quantum nature of time itself, we have been engaged in the same fundamental quest to comprehend this strange dimension in which we exist, which carries us forward whether we will it or not, which gives shape to our lives even as it remains essentially mysterious. As we continue forward in time, as we always must, we carry with us this rich heritage of temporal innovation. Every glance at a clock, every alarm that wakes us, every timestamp on a message connects us to this long chain of human achievement. We are the inheritors of thousands of years of efforts to capture and quantify time, and we are also the creators of new ways of experiencing and understanding it. Let us continue now to explore deeper into some of the fascinating tangential stories and technological marvels that we've touched upon, for the history of timekeeping is filled with countless tales of innovation, determination, and sometimes delightful eccentricity that deserve our gentle attention. Consider, for instance, The remarkable story of the Antikythera mechanism, discovered in 1901 by sponge divers off the coast of the Greek island of Antikythera. This device, dating from around 100 BCE, was found in a shipwreck and initially dismissed as merely interesting corroded bronze. But as researchers carefully studied it over the decades, they discovered something extraordinary. It was an ancient analog computer of stunning complexity, designed to calculate astronomical positions and predict celestial events. The mechanism contained at least 37 meshing bronze gears, with teeth so precisely cut that they rival modern manufacturing. It could track the movements of the sun and moon, predict eclipses, and even account for the irregular orbit of the moon. This device represents a level of mechanical sophistication that wouldn't be seen again in Europe for more than 1,000 years. It reminds us that the history of technology is not always a story of linear progress. Sometimes, knowledge is lost and must be rediscovered by later generations. Picture the ancient Greek craftsman who created this device, working with bronze and simple tools, calculating gear ratios to model the complex dance of celestial bodies. This wasn't just technical skill. It was a profound understanding of astronomy and mathematics embodied in metal. The Antikythera mechanism suggests that our ancient ancestors were far more sophisticated in their understanding of time and cosmic cycles than we often give them credit for. Let us turn now to another fascinating aspect of historical timekeeping, the equation of time. If you've ever looked closely at a sundial, you might have noticed a figure-8-shaped diagram or a table of corrections. This is because sundials show apparent solar time, based on the actual position of the sun, while our clocks show mean solar time, based on a fictional sun that moves at a constant rate. The difference between these two times varies throughout the year, reaching a maximum of about 16 minutes. This variation occurs because Earth's orbit is elliptical, not circular, and because Earth's axis is tilted relative to its orbital plane. In February, sundials run about 14 minutes slow compared to clock time. In November, they run about 16 minutes fast. This discrepancy puzzled ancient astronomers and wasn't fully understood until Johannes Kepler's laws of planetary motion in the early 17th century. The equation of time is a beautiful reminder that our mechanical and atomic clocks, for all their precision, are abstractions. They show us a simplified, idealized version of time, while the actual universe moves in complex, non-uniform patterns. Every precise clock is, in a sense, a philosophical statement about what aspects of natural phenomena we choose to emphasize and what we choose to ignore. Moving forward through history, let us examine the fascinating development of the marine chronometer in greater detail, for it represents one of the most dramatic technological races in history. The British Parliament's Longitude Act of 1714 offered a prize of £20,000, millions in today's currency, for a method to determine longitude at sea to within half a degree. This wasn't just about exploration or trade, it was about saving lives. The loss of Admiral Sir Cloudesley Shovel's fleet on the Scilly Isles in 1707, with the death of up to 2,000 sailors, had dramatized the urgent need for accurate navigation. The scientific establishment, including Sir Isaac Newton, believed the solution would be astronomical, using observations of the moon's position against the stars to determine time and therefore longitude. This lunar distance method was theoretically sound but practically difficult, requiring complex calculations and clear skies. John Harrison, the self-taught clockmaker we mentioned earlier, pursued the mechanical solution that most experts considered impossible. Harrison's journey was not just one of technical innovation, but of political struggle. Even after his H4 chronometer proved its accuracy, the Board of Longitude, dominated by astronomers who favored the lunar distance method, was reluctant to award him the full prize. Harrison had to appeal directly to King George III, who reportedly said, "By God, Harrison, I will see you right it." Finally, in 1773, at the age of 80, Harrison received the recognition and compensation he deserved. But Harrison's story doesn't end with his personal triumph. His chronometers were handmade masterpieces, far too expensive for widespread use. It was later clockmakers, particularly Thomas Earnshaw and John Arnold, who developed simplified designs that could be mass-produced at reasonable cost. By the early 19th century, marine chronometers were standard equipment on naval and merchant vessels, fundamentally changing the nature of sea travel and global commerce. Let us now drift into the fascinating world of time zones and the peculiarities they create. While we touched on the standardization of time earlier, the actual implementation of time zones around the world has created some delightful oddities. China, spanning what would naturally be 5 time zones, uses a single time zone for the entire country, Beijing time. This means that in Western China, the sun might not rise until what the clock says is 10 a.m., and sunset might not occur until midnight. In Xinjiang province in far western China, some communities unofficially use Xinjiang time, 2 hours behind Beijing time, creating a complex situation where you might need to clarify which time system someone is using when making an appointment. This is a powerful reminder that time zones are political constructs as much as practical ones, expressions of national unity or regional identity. Consider also the international date line, that imaginary boundary where one calendar day becomes the next. The line doesn't follow the 180-degree meridian exactly, but zigzags to avoid splitting countries and island groups. The nation of Kiribati made headlines in 1995 when it moved the date line to the east of the entire country, making it the first nation to see each new day and, notably, the first to celebrate the year 2000. This was partly a practical measure to avoid having different parts of the country on different days, but it was also a savvy move to attract millennium tourism. There are places where time zones create even stranger situations. The town of Lloydminster, on the border between Alberta and Saskatchewan in Canada, is split between 2 time zones. The provincial boundary runs down the main street, so in theory, you could have lunch on one side of the street and walk across to the other side, where it's still an hour before lunch. In practice, the entire town observes Alberta time, but it illustrates the arbitrary nature of our temporal boundaries. Let us now explore the profound impact of electric light on our relationship with time. Before the widespread adoption of electric lighting in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, human activities were largely constrained by the natural cycle of day and night. Candles and oil lamps extended activities somewhat into the evening, but they were expensive and posed fire hazards. Most people rose with the sun and retired not long after sunset. The advent of electric light fundamentally changed this ancient pattern. Suddenly, factories could operate around the clock, shops could stay open after dark, and social activities could extend deep into the night. The electric light didn't just illuminate darkness, it colonized it, turning night into a continuation of day rather than a separate realm with its own character and purposes. This transformation had profound effects on human health and society that we're only beginning to fully understand. Our circadian rhythms, evolved over millions of years to respond to natural light cycles, are disrupted by artificial light, particularly the blue light emitted by modern LED screens. The invention of the light bulb, in a very real sense, broke our ancient covenant with natural time, creating a 24-hour society that never fully sleeps. Consider the night shift worker, living in a temporal world inverted from the majority of society. They sleep when others work when others sleep, existing in a kind of temporal exile. The health effects of shift work, increased rates of heart disease, diabetes, depression, suggest that our bodies never fully adapt to these artificial schedules, that we remain creatures of the natural light-dark cycle despite our technological ability to override it. As we continue our journey, let us examine the fascinating relationship between music and timekeeping. Long before mechanical clocks, music provided a way to measure and structure time. The steady beat of a drum, the rhythmic patterns of a chant, the measured phrases of a song. These were humanity's first timekeeping technologies in a very real sense. In medieval monasteries, the singing of psalms and hymns served as a kind of clock, marking the canonical hours of prayer. An experienced monk could estimate the time of night by which psalm was being sung in the divine office. The development of musical notation in the Middle Ages was, in part, an effort to standardize and control musical time, to ensure that sacred music was performed with proper duration and rhythm. The invention of the metronome by Dietrich Nikolaus Winkel and Johann Maelzel in the early 19th century represents a fascinating convergence of musical and mechanical timekeeping. This device, which produces a steady pulse at an adjustable rate, allowed composers to specify exact tempos for their works and musicians to practice with mechanical precision. Beethoven was one of the first major composers to include metronome markings in his scores, though he later had doubts about reducing musical expression to mechanical measurement. Today, electronic music takes this relationship between time and sound to new extremes. Digital audio workstations allow musicians to manipulate time with unprecedented precision, stretching and compressing sounds, creating rhythms impossible for human performers, synchronizing multiple tracks to microsecond accuracy. Electronic dance music, with its precise beats per minute and quantized rhythms, creates a sonic architecture of time that dancers inhabit with their bodies. Let us now turn our attention to biological timekeeping, the clocks that tick within every living cell. The discovery of circadian rhythms, the roughly 24-hour cycles that govern many biological processes, revealed that timekeeping is not just a human invention, but a fundamental feature of life itself. These biological clocks are remarkably sophisticated. In the 1970s, scientists discovered that even individual cells kept time, with specific genes turning on and off in regular cycles. The molecular mechanism involves feedback loops of gene expression, with proteins accumulating until they inhibit their own production, then degrading until production resumes. This creates a self-sustaining oscillation with a period of approximately 24 hours. What's particularly fascinating is that these cellular clocks can be synchronized by external cues, primarily light, but continue to run even in constant darkness. Experiments with people living in caves or bunkers without any time cues show that humans have an intrinsic circadian period slightly longer than 24 hours, typically about 24 hours and 15 minutes. This is why most people find it easier to stay up late than to wake up early. Our natural tendency is to drift later relative to the solar day. Plants, too, have sophisticated biological clocks. The opening and closing of flowers, the movement of leaves, the timing of photosynthesis, all are controlled by circadian rhythms. Carl Linnaeus, the great 18th century botanist, even proposed a flower clock garden where different flowers, opening and closing at different times of day, could be used to tell time. Consider the Arctic tern, which migrates from Arctic to Antarctic and back each year, experiencing nearly constant daylight for much of its life. Yet it maintains circadian rhythms, its internal clock somehow keeping time despite the absence of clear day-night cycles. Or think of the marine midge Clunio marinus, which not only has a circadian clock, but also a circulunar clock, timing its reproduction to coincide with the lowest tides of the lunar month. These biological clocks remind us that time is not just a physical or technological phenomenon, but something embedded in the very fabric of life. Every cell in your body contains molecular machinery that tracks the passage of time, coordinating countless physiological processes. When we travel across time zones or work night shifts, we're not just confusing our conscious sense of time, we're disrupting ancient cellular rhythms that influence everything from hormone production to DNA repair. Now let us explore the concept of time in different cultures, for not all societies have understood or valued time in the same way. The Western linear conception of time, as an arrow flying from past to future, as a resource to be saved or spent, is not universal. Many cultures have traditionally viewed time as cyclical, emphasizing repetition and renewal rather than progress and accumulation. In the Hindu and Buddhist traditions, time is conceived on vast scales that dwarf our ordinary experience. A kalpa, a single day in the life of Brahma, lasts 4.32 billion years. The universe goes through endless cycles of creation and destruction, with time itself being cyclical rather than linear. This cosmic perspective can inspire both humility about our brief individual existence and a sense of connection to eternal processes. The Aymara people of the Andes have a particularly interesting conceptual relationship with time. In their language and gesture, the past is in front and the future is behind. This makes sense when you think about it. We can see the past through memory, while the future is unseen behind us. When an Aymara speaker talks about past events, they gesture forward. When discussing the future, they gesture backward. The Piraha people of the Amazon have no words for specific times, no counting system, and no way to talk about distant past or future events. They live in what linguist Daniel Everett calls the immediacy of experience, concerned only with the present and the directly observable. While this might seem limiting from our perspective, it also means they experience no anxiety about future events or regret about the past. In many African cultures, time is traditionally event-based rather than clock-based. Things happen when they're ready to happen, when all the necessary conditions are met, not because a certain hour has arrived. A meeting begins when everyone has gathered. A ceremony starts when the preparations are complete. This can be frustrating for those accustomed to clock time, but it prioritizes human relationships and readiness over mechanical precision. The Japanese concept of ma, often translated as negative space or pause, recognizes the importance of the intervals between events. In traditional Japanese arts, the silence between notes, the empty space in a painting, the pause in a conversation are not absences but positive features, as important as the sounds, marks, or words themselves. This attention to temporal negative space offers a different way of experiencing time, not as something to be filled, but as something that includes essential emptiness. Let us now consider how the measurement of time has influenced our understanding of the physical universe. The development of accurate clocks was essential for many scientific discoveries. Galileo's studies of falling bodies, for instance, required him to measure short time intervals. Lacking accurate clocks, he used his pulse and later a water clock to time balls rolling down inclined planes, discovering that the distance traveled is proportional to the square of the elapsed time. The precise measurement of stellar positions over time revealed the aberration of starlight, providing the first direct evidence that Earth orbits the Sun. The careful timing of eclipses of Jupiter's moons allowed Ole Romer to make the first measurement of the speed of light in 1676. The discovery of the finite speed of light was profound. It meant that when we look at distant stars, we're literally looking back in time. The relationship between time and physics became even more intimate with Einstein's theories of relativity. Special relativity showed that time is not absolute, but depends on the observer's motion. Two events that are simultaneous for one observer may not be simultaneous for another moving relative to the first. Time dilation means that a clock moving relative to an observer runs slower than a stationary clock. General relativity went further, showing that gravity affects the flow of time. Clocks run slower in stronger gravitational fields. This is not just theoretical. GPS satellites must account for both special relativistic effects, due to their motion, and general relativistic effects, due to their altitude above Earth's surface. Without these corrections, GPS would accumulate errors of about 10 kilometers per day. These discoveries fundamentally changed our understanding of what time is. It's not a universal backdrop against which events occur, but something intimately connected to space, matter, and energy. The universe doesn't exist in time. Rather, time is a feature of the universe, emerging from more fundamental physical processes. Modern physics has pushed our understanding of time to even stranger territories. In quantum mechanics, particles can exist in superpositions of states, seemingly experiencing multiple timelines simultaneously until observed. Quantum entanglement creates correlations between particles that seem to transcend normal temporal causality. Some interpretations of quantum mechanics suggest that time itself might be emergent rather than fundamental, arising from the decoherence of quantum states. As we contemplate these profound ideas, let us also consider the more mundane, but equally important ways that precise timekeeping has transformed human society. The synchronization of electrical power grids, for instance, depends on precise timing to ensure that alternating current from different generators remains in phase. Without this synchronization, power grids would be unstable and prone to blackouts. The internet, too, depends on precise timing. Data packets must be properly sequenced and synchronized across networks. Cryptographic protocols often depend on timestamps to prevent replay attacks. High-frequency trading algorithms make decisions in microseconds, with firms spending millions to shave nanoseconds off their transaction times. In these contexts, time truly is money, with competitive advantages measured in billionths of a second. Consider the challenge of maintaining synchronized time across a global computer network. The network time protocol, which most computers use to set their clocks, must account for variable network delays, asymmetric transmission paths, and the reliability of different time sources. It's a complex dance of algorithms and statistics, all to ensure that computers around the world agree on what time it is to within a few milliseconds. The criminal justice system, too, has been transformed by precise timekeeping. Surveillance cameras with accurate timestamps can establish alibis or prove guilt. Cell phone location data, correlated with time, can track a person's movements with unprecedented precision. Digital forensics relies on file timestamps to reconstruct the sequence of events on a computer. Time has become a silent witness to human activities, creating permanent records of when things happened. Let us now explore some of the more unusual and creative approaches to timekeeping that humans have devised. The Long Now Foundation, established in 1996, is building a clock designed to run for 10,000 years, the Clock of the Long Now. This magnificent project, housed inside a mountain in Texas, is intended to inspire long-term thinking, to be a monument to time itself that will outlast civilizations. The clock's design is a marvel of engineering foresight. It must be maintainable with Bronze Age technology, in case future civilizations lose our current capabilities. It must be accurate without regular adjustment, accounting for the slowing of Earth's rotation over millennia. It must be interesting enough that people will want to maintain it, but not so valuable that it will be looted for materials. Every design decision involves thinking about deep time, about how materials degrade, how languages evolve, how cultures rise and fall. Another fascinating temporal experiment is the pitch drop experiment at the University of Queensland, which has been running since 1927. A funnel of pitch, a substance that appears solid but flows very slowly, has produced only 9 drops in nearly a century. The experiment demonstrates that our perception of solidity and fluidity depends on the timescale of observation. What seems permanent on human timescales may be fluid on geological ones. Time capsules represent another way humans have played with time, sending messages to the future. The Crypt of Civilization at Oglethorpe University, sealed in 1940 and intended to be opened in 8113, contains artifacts and microfilm documenting 1930s life. The Westinghouse time capsules, buried at the 1939 and 1964 World's Fairs, are intended to be opened in 6939. These projects represent acts of faith that future humans will exist, will be curious about us, and will be able to understand our messages. Some artists have created works that unfold over extended periods. John Cage's composition As Slow as Possible is being performed on an organ in Halberstadt, Germany, with a planned duration of 639 years. The performance began in 2001, and the next note change isn't scheduled until 2026. Visitors can come hear the current chord, which has been sounding for years, a meditation on duration and patience that challenges our expectation of music as temporal change. As we near the end of our exploration, let us reflect on the future of timekeeping and what it might mean for humanity. Researchers are developing optical lattice clocks that could be accurate to 1 second in 30 billion years, far exceeding the age of the universe. These clocks might detect gravitational waves, test whether fundamental constants change over time, or search for dark matter. Networks of ultra-precise clocks could create a quantum internet, where information is transmitted through entangled particles, potentially enabling perfectly secure communication and distributed quantum computing. Time synchronization at the attosecond level, billionths of a billionth of a second, could enable new forms of imaging and sensing, allowing us to watch chemical reactions as they happen or see inside living cells without damage. But alongside these technological advances, there's also a growing movement to reconsider our relationship with time. The slow movement, slow food, slow cities, slow technology, advocates for a more deliberate pace of life, resisting the acceleration that precise timekeeping has enabled. Digital detox retreats offer escape from the constant temporal demands of connected devices. Some companies are experimenting with results-only work environments, where employees are judged on output rather than hours logged. These movements recognize that while precise timekeeping has enabled incredible coordination and productivity, it has also created new forms of stress and alienation. The ability to measure time precisely doesn't necessarily mean we should optimize every moment. Sometimes the most valuable experiences are those that exist outside the framework of measured time. The lingering conversation, the aimless walk, the afternoon lost in a book. As we look to the future, we might ask whether humanity will continue to pursue ever greater temporal precision, or whether we'll find ways to selectively disengage from clock time when it doesn't serve us. Perhaps we'll develop technologies that adapt to our natural rhythms rather than forcing us to adapt to mechanical schedules. Perhaps we'll create new cultural practices that honor both the efficiency of precise timing and the wisdom of temporal flexibility. The development of artificial intelligence adds another dimension to the future of timekeeping. AI systems can operate on timescales far faster than human thought, making decisions in microseconds, analyzing patterns across vast temporal datasets. As AI becomes more prevalent, we may need new ways of thinking about time that bridge the gap between human temporal experience and machine temporal processing. Virtual and augmented reality technologies offer the possibility of manipulating our perception of time. Just as films can compress or expand time through editing, VR experiences could allow us to experience different temporal flows, to slow down or speed up our subjective experience of duration. This could have therapeutic applications, educational uses, or simply offer new forms of entertainment and art. Climate change, too, is forcing us to think about time in new ways. The consequences of our current actions will unfold over decades and centuries, requiring us to plan and think on timescales that exceed individual human lifespans. The concept of cathedral thinking, planning projects that won't be completed for generations, may become essential for our species' survival. As we conclude our journey through the history and future of timekeeping, let us return to where we began, to the fundamental mystery of time itself. Despite all our sophisticated tools for measuring it, despite our atomic clocks and GPS satellites and network protocols, time remains profoundly mysterious. We still don't fully understand what time is, whether it's fundamental or emergent, whether the past still exists in some sense or the future already does. The history of timekeeping is ultimately a history of human beings trying to understand and navigate their existence in a temporal universe. From the first person who noticed the shadow of a stick moving across the ground to the scientists building clocks that can detect the gravitational waves from colliding black holes, we have been engaged in the same essential project, trying to comprehend our place in the flow of time. Every timekeeping device we've created, from the simplest sundial to the most sophisticated atomic clock, is both a practical tool and a philosophical statement. They embody our beliefs about what time is, what aspects of it matter, how precisely it needs to be measured. They shape our daily lives, our social structures, our understanding of the universe itself. As you drift off to sleep tonight, perhaps you'll think about the long chain of innovation and insight that connects you to our ancient ancestors watching shadows move across the ground. The same fundamental questions that puzzled them continue to puzzle us, even as our tools for exploring those questions have become incomparably more sophisticated. Time carries us all forward, whether we measure it or not, whether we understand it or not. But in our attempts to measure and understand it, we reveal something essential about human nature, our desire to comprehend the incomprehensible, to find patterns in the flow of existence, to create meaning and structure in a universe that often seems chaotic and uncertain. The story of timekeeping is far from over. As long as humans exist, we will continue to devise new ways of measuring, experiencing, and thinking about time. We will continue to struggle with the tension between natural and mechanical time, between the efficiency of precision and the wisdom of flexibility, between the anxiety of deadlines and the peace of timelessness. And so, as we come to the close of our exploration, we find ourselves not at an ending, but at a moment in an ongoing story, a story in which you, the listener, are a participant. Every time you check the time, every time you set an alarm, every time you coordinate plans with another person, you're participating in this ancient and ongoing human project of creating shared temporal frameworks. May you carry with you from this journey a deeper appreciation for the complexity and beauty of timekeeping, for the ingenuity of those who came before us, and for the mysterious nature of time itself. May you find in your own life the right balance between the precision of clocks and the flexibility of experienced time, between punctuality and presence, between efficiency and ease. As the seconds tick by, as the Earth continues its ancient rotation, as atoms vibrate in their quantum dance, time continues its steady flow, carrying us all toward tomorrow. And in that flow, in that great river of time that has carried humanity from its earliest days to this present moment, we find both our smallness and our significance, both our mortality and our connection to something larger than ourselves. The measurement of time, this uniquely human endeavor we've explored together, stands as one of our species' great achievements, a testament to our curiosity, our ingenuity, and our deep need to understand the nature of our existence. From sundials to atomic clocks, from water clocks to quantum time, the story of timekeeping is the story of us, of our ceaseless effort to comprehend and navigate the temporal dimension of our lives. And now, as you prepare to rest, to enter that timeless realm of sleep where hours can pass in what seems like moments or moments can stretch into seeming hours, remember that you carry within you biological clocks billions of years in the making, that you are connected to cosmic rhythms that predate our planet, that you are part of a universe where time itself may be far stranger and more wonderful than we yet understand. Let these thoughts accompany you into peaceful slumber, knowing that while you sleep, the Earth will continue its rotation, atomic clocks will continue their precise oscillations, and time will continue its mysterious flow. And when you wake, you'll rejoin the great human project of living in time, measuring time, and trying to understand what time truly is. May your dreams be timeless, and your rest be deep. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the remarkable story of how humanity has measured, understood, and related to time throughout our history. Rest well, and let time carry you gently through the night toward tomorrow's awakening.